very important to understand what is the path? How did we get to be here? How are we going to find our way back? Which is precisely what Kriya Yoga is. Kriya Yoga says you all have to get back to your soul's natural state, and here is the perfect tool to do that. Kevalananda, who was one of Yogananda's great teachers, you've read about him in the AY, he said it is the best tool for self-liberation based on self-effort that's ever been in this world. The best tool for self-liberation, meaning letting go of our ego and our ego's connection in the world to everything. We all have that. We come into the world from the instant, really, that we're conceived. It's our nature to want to be looking out. That's the divine plan too. We're not being bad by doing that. It's not a terrible thing that we're a little hooked on things in the external world. That's the nature of the human condition. And we shouldn't forget, it is a great gift to be born into a human life, to have evolved to this point where we actually have the ego, which is not our enemy, because it's the very ego that says to us, you know what, there's more. You actually want more. There are ways to get more. So we spend our whole lives on a spiritual path trying to move beyond ego, and that's right. But this human birth into, as Master said, the ego is a soul identified with the body. Many of us have heard that. So we can't quite get away from it as long as we're living in these human bodies. But we're using it. We're using the way that the soul sees the world to remind ourselves, this isn't it. This isn't it. Wherever we look, no, this really isn't it. There's something more. Every person in this room has been inexorably drawn to that something more, or we wouldn't be here. There was a man last night who was in that room. It was the first time he had been there, though. Once before he had been to something, Ananda. And I was just looking at him and I thought, does he have any idea about the great good karma that drew him into that room? What is it that had him come to a talk on Kriya Yoga last night? It's great good karma. It's God's grace. It's Master saying, come here, let me show you. I'm going to take you by the hand. You didn't know this, but you actually want to be at the Ananda Center at Thousand Oaks tonight. Literally, we get picked up that way. I was just telling Narayana Dharma Devi today, I have 3 books I want to write. And one of them is a book filled with stories of all of the ways that we were called onto this path. What's the first time somebody saw the autobiography? How many times did you put it down before you could read through to the end? How exactly were you drawn onto this path? I'll share my story with you. I was living in San Diego, and I had already had a very powerful experience with Yogananda, who I had no idea who he was. I had never heard the word Swami. I knew nothing. This was in the 70s. It was very different in the US in the 70s. And I was running down the beach, and I had taken notice, I was in Encinitas actually, of the Hermitage, the Encinitas Hermitage, which I'm sure many of you had seen. And I would always say to my husband, that Swami guy who they always talk about, oh, what do they mean by self-realization? One time, I even had the nerve to say to my husband, he and I were both I was a nurse, he was a doctor, but we both knew that the mind and the body were connected. It sounds so silly to say it now, but in those days, people didn't know it. If you were in medicine, nobody thought that the mind had anything to do. They were trying to treat the body separately. So we were trying to say to our medical colleagues, that's not how it works. And I pointed to Master's picture and I said, I bet you these people know that the mind and the body work together. Just to tell you how little I knew. But anyway, this is not a whole story that I'm going to tell, but a little bit. One day I was running, and I was stopped in my tracks in front of, on the beach, on the, what they call Swami's Beach, right below the Hermitage. And I heard, just like this, you have to go to medical school, and it needs to be an Ivy League medical school. And it was so much the truth that I turned around in my run, and I ran home, and I said to my husband, you know, I was in front of that Swami's place, and I just heard I'm supposed to go to medical school. And my husband, who was a doctor already, said to me, well, what should we do? I said, apply. And you know, you have to realize it was that kind of downloading of truth. But that's not what drew me onto this path, because I didn't know anything. I didn't know who he was, what he was. I'd certainly never heard of Swami Kriyananda or Ananda. We're getting ready to move up here. These are all true stories. And I know that many of you have had these stories. That's why I said I wanted to write the book. We're in this big bookstore in San Diego. And I'm talking to Barry, my husband, and we're talking about Palo Alto. And this man walks up to me, scruffy, big beard, big guy. He walks right up to me like this. Did I hear you say you're going to Palo Alto? I mean, it really startled me, it scared me. I said, yes, we're moving. The first thing you do, he says, just like this, the first thing is you go to East West Bookstore. I mean, out of the blue. You know, that's what I was saying about this lovely man who was in the room last night. When it's our time and Master wants us, you know, they just come and they get us and they put us where we belong. It is so deeply touching that all we ever have to do is believe that, open to that, which is exactly what Christ meant when he says to those who will receive him. That's what that means. It means much more, which we'll talk about energy in the spine and Kriya, but it means be willing to hear, not the words or the logic. What is logical about that? We drove our little U-Haul up to Palo Alto. We unpacked the truck for 2 days. The next day, my husband said, what are we going to do today? I said, we're going to East West Bookstore. I mean, there is just no question in my mind. You know, when you hear truth like that, you know that. But I wanted to share another story with you because I want you to, you see, when those things happened to me, it took me decades to really plug back into them and to get, I don't know what happened. It's somehow like my mind was closed to the miraculous nature of what was going on. Must be in the New Path, Swami Kriyananda's book, where he tells a story of a fellow monk who was hitchhiking. Mm-hmm. And Master had always told everybody not to hitchhike. And the monk gets picked up, and he knows immediately when he's in a car that he's with bad guys. These are the bad guys. They stop at a house and they tell him, go knock on that door. And he knows they want to do bad things. He knocks and knocks and knocks. Nobody opens the door. Anyway, he gets back in the car, and a little bit later they throw him out of the car, and he finds his way back to the wherever he was going, either Encinitas or Mount Washington. The next morning, Master says to him, I thought I told you not to hitchhike. You know, he hadn't told Master he was hitchhiking. Master said, I had to close the ears of the people in the house so nothing bad would happen. I had to close the ears. Well, many years after that experience on Swami's Beach, I just felt like whatever he did to not have me question, not a beat's pause, but to go have the nerve to apply to Harvard, Yale, Duke, Stanford, because he had said it has to be an Ivy League school. It's remarkable. I just did it. I mean, I didn't even think twice about it. I wasn't smart enough to go to those schools. Really, I'm not an intellectual. It wasn't who I was. And yet, I got accepted to Yale, then I got accepted to Stanford, then I'm waitlisted at Duke. You know, I mean, the Red Seas may as well have a party. And I had nothing to do with it. This is what happens. But here's a story that I want to share that happened later to talk to you about the power of Kriya Yoga, though it wasn't yet about Kriya. I came to Ananda in 1979, and I was at Ananda for a number of years, and then I had an experience with another teacher, a very highly evolved man who Swamiji knew. He brought him up to the village a few times. His name was Sankeshavadas. And I went off with Sankeshavadas for about 6 or 7 years. And I frequently went to India with him. I spent a lot of time in India. And I would go on these pilgrimages every year for a couple months, and I would be the group doctor on the pilgrimage. So one day, Sankeshavadas says to me, "Shanti Ma, we're about to go to the place where my guru left his body." And he said, "When we get there, I will leave my body." He said, "I'll have no choice." He said, "I'll look like I'm dead." These are the words he said to me exactly. "Don't do anything." Just like that. I mean, again, it's hard to imagine now because we've all had more experience. So we go to this site, and he just sits down on the ground and he dies. Remember, I'm a doctor now. I check his pulse, I look for breathing, nothing. 15 or 20 minutes later, he sits back up, and he just looks at me, comes right over to me, takes my face. "Shanti Ma, did I scare you a little?" Just like that. I said, no, Guruji, you didn't. Just like this, because I trusted him. I'm telling you that story because somebody named this talk The Science of Kriya Yoga. And I'm thinking, how can I talk about that? There's no real, I could tell you what it says in the chapter, The Science of Kriya Yoga, an autobiography of a yogi, but the science part of it, I mean, we could talk about how carbon dioxide's taken out of the cells more quickly and more oxygen's brought in, and it really brings extra energy into the astral spine, into the brain, into the chakras, and it actually really helps them because of the increased oxygenation. That's the science of it. It's sort of like, who cares? Really, who cares? But it is exactly what allows these great yogis to leave their body for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and more than that. When Asha and David used to lead a lot of pilgrimages to India, they would meet with a yogi every year, pretty high up in the Himalayas. And that yogi, that great teacher, when winter would be coming, his disciples would lock him in a tiny little building, and he would be standing. They would close him in for the winter, high up in the Himalayas. And when the snow started melting, they would come back, these disciples, open the door, and the guru would just walk out. Like, "Hey, how are you?" Like it was any other night of the week or the year. What is that? Really, we say, what is that? And here is Yogananda coming, and Jesus coming, and every other great spiritual teacher coming and saying, you are not this body. You were never meant to be in a body that could be corrupted. You are infinite. Everything I am, you are too, and more, Jesus said. Meaning, don't get sidetracked by the body. Everything I am, that which you can see and that which you can't see, that we have it within ourselves right now. We are infinite. We too are infinite. We've gotten sidetracked, we've gotten a little deluded by these egos. We came in just for this, as I said, It's not like we're silly or bad or, you know, we're part of this human condition. So we have to go through whatever we need to go through. But our job, the reason we so desperately want to be initiated into Kriya Yoga is because after this sperm and ovum unite, I mean, many of you in the room know this story, and the soul chooses exactly that situation to come into, that perfect situation to help it along the soul's long journey. For those of you who've ever heard the festival, how many times does it say, the next step on the soul's long journey, the next step, the Festival of Light, which we read every Sunday, it starts out first away from its home in God, away, first the soul's revolting. Then it sort of starts awakening. Then we go on a quest. And that's what we're doing. We've all now entered that stage called yoga. Really, the stage of a soul evolving. We've lived through a million lifetimes of not knowing, not caring. Then we wake up. It's Shankya, then yoga, and here we are. How are we going to do this? That sperm and ovum have united, and they come from the astral world as an energetic being. First thing that happens is the medulla is formed. Then this astral spine. Then our whole nervous system. Then all of the other vital organs, heart, lung, liver, everything. And then here we are. We come out screaming, you know?